I put
Wait,
so
really
much time into this, but it's finally ready. Alright, one
Oh my
sec.
god, jeez.
Alright, one sec.
I totally forgot you were still working on that whatever project.
Don't worry about it. It's happening though. Oh my god, this is beautiful! This is the best thing I have
pass it
ever
around,
created!
general deal.
It's ready.
Oh.
Behold.
Show us your final product. Oh. This is so much effort that it needed to be.
Oh wait, how big is this? Tony, you might actually be able to use this as your profile pic.
Alright, give me a second.
Oh yeah. Try to it.
Does Tony have nitro? Or... He does have nitro, yeah.
Dude,
He has an Amex gravestone, of course he has nitro.
I'm saving this. Holy shit.
Okay, we set one anyways. Let me look at it here.
Oh, that is so good.
This is so much effort, but it was worth it.
That's mine now.
It's okay.
Okay. Hello everyone, it's Jinx and I'm a Genshin Impact math guy now. Alright, so in today's video, what I want to talk about is the 4-star characters in the game that are at least at 5-star power level, if not higher. Originally, I was planning on talking about, at the very least, the 3 4-star carries at a 5-star power level, which is Bennett, Regen, and Xiangling with Crescent Pike. However, even when I was trying to be brief, just talking about Bennett took me like 20 minutes, so that'll be a future video instead. So yeah, this is going to be a series where I'm going to talk about the 4 stars in the game that do have 5-star or higher power level. A lot of people seem to have the misconception that you need to have 5-star characters to have strong teams, and this isn't true. You just need to have teams that have strong synergy. Case in point, the footage above is from my very first ever BiS 12 clear, where I was intentionally using very undergeared teams. The team that actually had the easier time in BiS Floor 12-3 is going to be this 4-star team right here. And the only character with a leveled up set is my Bennett. Everyone else is running bare minimum artifacts. My Chongyun, in fact, is only level 40 with a level 1 SAC GS. Later on in the video, we'll switch over to background footage of my more recent BiS 12 clear that was very cozy. It was about a 30 to 40 minute session to get a 7-star clear on the BiS 12. I probably could have hit 8 stars, maybe even 9 stars if I was playing really sweaty, but I just wanted to get it over with so I could work on videos. The exact same teams, the only difference is that my Jingqiu now has a proper plus 16 burst support set, so the damage output goes up significantly in my team. And I think my Xiangling has like a level 60 instead of level 50 Dragon's Bane now, very minor DPS increase. Oh, and I'm running a level 1 refined for Bell GS on Chongyun instead now, just so he can soak an extra hit. Also, a quick aside just to show the Twitters real quick, because my Twitter at JinxMathlos is where I do talk about the various things I'm working on, the stuff I've done and whatnot before they actually come to video form. And the at JinxTuner one is the company account run by Tuner that talks about his various stream updates as well as channel updates and things we're working on in general. Speaking of which, be sure to check out Tuner over at twitch.tv/Tuner. He does run primarily Noel comps as well as Bennett comps, and he is looking at doing quite a bit of BiS clearing. Also, when the new banner comes out, he will be pulling for Zhongli and seeing how well he does work and how his mechanics work with various geo comps. I will personally be focusing a bit more on testing out Jin Yan synergies and power level, as well as how Zhongli works as a Petra support in general teams. Now, don't get me wrong, some characters are simply built stronger than others. The only difference between a bottom tier character and a top tier character in this game is simply put how much output they can get for the same amount of investment into weapons, talent levels, and artifacts. However, that doesn't mean all the 5 stars are simply the best at this, because in fact that's not the case. Hence this video series, because at the end of the day there are several 4 stars in this game that are simply put better or at least as strong as the 5-star competitors. In fact, I'm pretty much a big believer that almost every character in this game is at least S tier as long as they are in a team that is utilizing them for synergy properly and they're doing their proper role. Generally speaking, in my tier list, which I do plan on doing a new one for 1.2 with all the stuff I've learned over 1.1 at some point in the future, if a character is an A tier, it's normally because they're not in their correct role on a team. For example, Jean, Chi-Chi, Fischl, and Venti are all S or SS tier supports, but if you try to make them into a carry, they just aren't as good as the characters that are designed to be carries. The only 2 characters I really consider this to not be the case are going to be Lisa and Amber, just because their numbers are kind of weak, so they do require a lot more investment in terms of artifacts, weapons, etc. to really be outputting heavily. heavily. And even then, Lisa with Constellation becomes some nasty damage output, but she kind of does need high Constellations to access this. That, and if we're talking just in terms of pure DPS output, generally speaking the Geo characters do fall behind because they have high base damage but low multipliers, and they are meant to be the tanky element. They are supposed to trade out damage to have more tankiness, which is very valuable. But when we're talking about tier lists based on how much DPS output you can get out of a character in a team composition, they do rank a bit lower. The endgame content is primarily gated by how much DPS you can put out, not how much hits you can survive, and you can always reset if you get hit too much. Now, this doesn't mean you shouldn't run a healer. You should always run a healer because it's unrealistic to never get hit, but you only need enough healing and tankiness for your personal skill level. Now, I say it in pretty much every video, but I will say it again. At the end of the day, it is a game. Have fun and play how you want to enjoy yourself. If you want to make an Amber or a Noelle or a Lisa or a Chi-Chi carry work in the late game content, it is possible and has been proven to work. It just simply takes more resource investment in your team to get their stats high enough to compensate for their weaker power, which means more weeks of resin grinding to get your characters up to snuff. The only difference again between a bottom and top tier character is simply put how much output they get from the same amount of investment into talents, levels, weapons, and artifacts. Everyone can be strong in this game if you simply spend enough weeks grinding better gear for them. And some characters just end up being the best in slot possible support for specific team comps, but otherwise are kind of trash. For example, Chongyun's support is pretty much useless in most team compositions. However, if you run him in a Bennett Melt team, he suddenly spikes to being a must-have support. In the background footage, you can see my Abyss 12 clear I did with undergeared teams, and I did use a very low investment Chongyun support for this team just so I could run a Melt comp for Bennett. The only reason my Chongyun isn't level 1 here is because I want him to be level 40 with a +4 flower just so he doesn't get one shot by any kind of damage in Abyss 12, but he can function doing this role at level 1. Outside of this team comp, Chongyun support doesn't really do anything, but in this particular team comp, it's very powerful. Having 5-star characters or having overpowered characters doesn't matter nearly as much as having strong team compositions with high amounts of synergy. Hence the Team Comp Masterclass series that I am currently working on, and the first video of that at the very least will be out next week. I do apologize for how slow a lot of these videos are coming out. Unfortunately, they do require quite a bit of editing, and I'm honestly still getting back into the swing of doing full-time editing as much as I used to. I'm also trying to be a bit healthier about it and not work myself to death at 60-70 hour weeks like I used to, so unfortunately trade-offs videos come out a bit slower. Alright, so let's talk about Bennett, because Bennett is the best 4-star in the game, no Kappa. In fact, he outpaces most of the 5-stars in the game in terms of how valuable he is. And yes, he is in the shop right now, so if you have the star glitter available to be able to purchase him, I highly recommend you do. I have pretty much been talking about how powerful Bennett is since like week 2 or 3 of this game being out. However, I haven't really been able to make a full video about it until now. Now, Bennett is going to be an S tier carry, however, he is not quite as strong as the top DPS 5-star carries in this game. However, he is only slightly behind them as well as Klee and Diluc in terms of carry output, and he is also the best support in the game. In fact, let's talk about his support power first, because this is what truly makes him invaluable. Bennett is literally the only character in the game currently that is almost always a must pick for any team if you can run him. This is because, in my opinion, as well as pretty much every theory crafter I talk to's opinion, is that Bennett is simply put the best healer slot character on any team comp. And yes, this includes Chi-Chi and Jean. There are specific team compositions that are incredibly powerful that do not run a Bennett, such as a Venti Jean combination with Diluc. However, these are the exceptions, not standard. So in a previous video, we did look over the actual healer and carry synergies chart I made that's going to be part of the masterclass series for team comp building. And if we look through this, we can see that Bennett is pretty much always either the best character to pick or one of the best characters to pick as the healer for synergy with your characters. There's pretty much one reason for this. His ult is massively overloaded. See, his ult is not only one of the best healing per seconds in the game and scales very cheaply because it scales over HP instead of attack, unlike Chi-Chi and Jean, but also when you're either Constellation 1 or even Constellation 0 and no longer need any healing inside of his ult, you get a massive attack buff. In fact, let's take a little look at this chart I made and tweeted out about how much attack he actually gives your team when they're on field. So for supports, we are going to be assuming he's only Ascension 4 because you don't really want to ever bring characters past that ideally, at least until all your characters have nice plus plus 16 sets, leveled up weapons and talents, etc. Future video about how you're supposed to effectively funnel resources in this game. And on top of that, we're running a level 60 out of 70 Ascension 4 weapon because you don't really want your support weapons to be over leveled until your teams are actually fully set and well artifacted up. Now we're going to run an energy recharge sword for Bennett because he is a burst support, meaning he exists to press his ult to buff your carry and heal your team. So there are really 4 options for that. We have Favonius and Sax Sword, which both have the same base attack for 4 stars. Both are about as good as each other. You just generally want to save your Sax Sword for someone like Jing Cho if you have the option. And then we also have the 3-star Skyrider Sword, which has much lower base attack, but is still a good energy recharge option if you don't have any of the better options. And then we of course have the 5-star Skyward Blade, which is also an energy recharge type and has the highest base attack because, well, it's 5-star. Now at level 6, which is the highest you can reasonably get without getting lucky on weekly boss materials for Bennett's ult, we convert 78% of this into the attack buff from his ult at Constellation 0. At Cons 1, this scaling goes up by 20% to 98% instead. As you can see, depending on whether we're C0 or C1, we're generally getting around 350 to 450 extra attack to anyone who is standing inside of Bennett's ult. Now, admittedly, if you don't have Constellation 1 Bennett, which if you can get him in the shop for Cons 1, do it because it is his best constellation. But without Cons 1 at Cons 0, instead Bennett can only get his attack buff when you no longer need healing inside of his ult. However, this is very rarely an issue because the healing per second is so high in his ult, you'll generally spend most of your time with this attack buff. You can tank ridiculous things inside of Bennett's ult because of how strong the healing per second is in it. This is what makes it really hard to justify a lot of the other healers in the game overrunning a Bennett for most team compositions because this flat attack buff is so much and higher than most of anything else that you can get in the game other than like a Gravestone, which is a 5-star weapon. It's also what enables a lot of the very end game compositions to run very heavy crit stacks in their artifacts because they don't have to worry about adding in the base amount of extra attack they need to really hit good breakpoints. You don't need to run extra attack percentage in your build if you have a plus 16 or plus 20 feather and you're standing on a Bennett ult, which allows your characters to focus more on building up crit stacks, which has much less diminishing returns than doing attack percent stacks, as we've explained in previous videos. And the best part of this too is that other than increasing Bennett and his weapons level, you don't have to even have any good artifacts on him. He just gives this because it's based off his base attack, which is only based off his level and his weapons level. This means that as long as you can invest in his weapon and his own level, he is an extremely cheap support because he doesn't need a good set. And he doesn't even need to have any HP in his set to have a high amount of healing at Ascension 4. Obviously, the amount of healing that is sufficient for you does depend on how often you get hit and how often you eat damage, but in my experience, Bennett at Ascension 4 without any HP in his build is plenty enough healing, especially because he's going to be ulting basically off of cooldown. Not only is his ult a relatively low cost at only 60, but also his Ascension stat is going to be energy recharge, meaning that he already has some in his build at base. And because Bennett as a support does not have to build any damage on his artifacts to provide a big amount of DPS increase to the team, he can just run straight up energy recharge in his artifacts and ult very easily off cooldown. And then on top of that, he is one of the S tier carries in the game. Next to Razor, who we'll be talking about next, I consider him the best 4-star carry in the game. Literally the only carries that are better than Bennett are Razor as well as the god tier 5-star carries. So Klee, Diluc, Kaching, and C6 Child. Yes, he is considered a better carry than non-Constellation 6 Child, as we've discussed in previous videos. Child isn't really supposed to be a hyper carry, and the teams where he's really strong are generally more expensive plus 16 teams that don't really run a traditional hyper carry, they run 4 burst supports. Not only does making Bennett a carry where he has a more upgraded weapon, even if you only leave him at Ascension 4, give him a much bigger attack buff that he gets to benefit from, but the thing that makes Bennett such a potent carry is that at Ascension 4, if he's inside of his ult, his E tap is only a 2-second cooldown. Quick side note, you literally never use any of the charge variations of Bennett's E. On carry Bennett, when he's inside of his ult and has his 2-second tap E, it actually takes longer to do it the full charge and animation of level 2 charge attack than it does to just do 2 E taps. Not only are you losing skill damage, you're also losing the auto attack damage you could do in between the tap E's doing this. And even when he's a burst support, the extra time it takes him to charge up and animate his full level 2 charge E or even his level 1 charge E just isn't worth losing the DPS on your actual DPS characters. There is a specific Wombo combo with a Child Mona Bennett team that does use this charge attack, but that's literally the only case I can think of. Basically, if you put a Mona ult on something, do a charge version of Bennett's E, and then do a child ult, both the Mona ult and the child ult get vaporized. Now, Bennett at base as a carry is not that strong. His basic attack combo is okay, and his damage per E is not that high. But once Bennett hits Ascension 4, he is going to be doing 3 basic attacks plus a tap E every 2 seconds. In terms of pure talent damage percentage per second, this is in line with god carries like Diluc and Kaching and Klee for raw percent per second outputs. On top of that, because he's using tap E's every 2 seconds, he suddenly becomes the highest energy generation character in the entire game. So even if you run him as a full damage carry with no energy recharge in his build, he's still popping his ult off cooldown because he funds it so well with his E spam. And he generates so much energy for your other teammates' ults, even if they aren't also pyro type and don't get the 3 times energy bonus from having the same damage type as his particles. They still get a massive amount of energy generation, which allows you to do ults much more quickly because he's the only character in the game that can actually get close to having 1 particle per second generation. And before you ask, no, Fischl cannot do 1 particle per second. There's a thing called internal cooldown on her ability. We'll get into that later when we talk about Fischl. She is going to be in the next video about 4-star support star 5-star power level, but the TLDR is she gets a little bit less than 30 particles per minute. So why with all of these advantages is Bennett not considered an SS tier, a god tier carry like Diluc, Klee, Kaching, and who we'll be talking about in a second, Razor? One simple reason, because he's split damage type. See, if you don't have Constellation 6 Bennett, he cannot convert his basic attacks from physical to pyro damage. This means you cannot get all of your bonuses and multipliers on 100% of Bennett's damage. And personally, even if I ever did get a Constellation 6 Bennett, I would not activate it because it disables his strongest team composition, which is a melt team. Now, in the previous video, I did talk about why I don't think Zhongli is going to be a very strong carry because he's a split damage type carry without mechanics that make him a stronger carry. He hasn't released yet, but his kit looks like he's built to be a burst support, not a carry. This is the same issue with characters like Chi-Chi, Jean, Fischl, and Venti, who people want to run as carries. They just simply are not meant to be carries, they're meant to be supports. This is because they deal split damage types, so if you run them as a carry, you have to either choose to focus on increasing their elemental damage or their physical damage, and regardless of which one you pick, you won't be able to do it to the majority of your damage you put out. Bennett has this same issue. The big difference is that compared to Chi-Chi, Jean, Fischl, or any of these other split damage type carries, Bennett just has much better talent damage percentage per second. The raw amount of damage per second he puts out in his ult because he can tap his E every 3 seconds is very, very high, which is what, in my opinion, does shoot him up past these A tier carries that are supposed to be supports but can be pretty good carries to an S tier carry because he just puts out so much raw numbers inside his ult. And he loses access to this DPS if he is not the carry on your team. Chi-Chi, Jean, Venti, Fischl, all of these characters still do the majority of the DPS output if they just pop out and press 2 buttons then leave. When you run these guys as a burst support and run a better carry like a Bennett, a Razor, a Diluc, a Klee, or a Kaching, you're not losing their burst support DPS while you still get to run a better carry's DPS who's on field. The other reason is because he simply builds stronger team comps than those other characters can if they are the carry for the team comp. The 2 reasons for this is because A, since Bennett is a healer, you don't have to run another healer if he's being your carry, meaning you can run an extra higher damage burst support in your team. However, Chi-Chi and Jean also both do this, but I still consider them weaker carries than Bennett. The reason why Bennett gets ahead of them is because he has access to melt compositions, and literally no other character in the game with the current roster we have can do melt compositions properly. See, as long as you just stick a Chong Yun with Bennett, he is suddenly able to do a very strong melt composition. He is able to melt on every single piece of pyro damage he does, either his 2-second tap E's or his ult he pops every 15 seconds, which doubles that pyro damage even with a level 1 Chong Yun in your team. This is the exact team comp I used to beat Abyss Floor 12 with undergeared teams. On top of that, if you mix that with Jing Cho, you now have a permafreeze team that permanently freezes anything in the game that can be frozen and then melts them for big damage, and then refreezes them again. Now, even with this melt, he still doesn't quite catch up to the god tier carries in the game like Klee, Diluc, and Kaching in terms of raw DPS output because he still is split damage type. But this does help close the gap a bit and does cement his place as one of the best 4-star carries in the game. Not to mention, permafreezing enemies kind of trivializes difficulty in this game. You don't have to dodge if things aren't moving. But yeah, that is my as short as I could possibly make it Bennett salesman pitch. Let's talk about artifacts briefly because they're pretty easy on Bennett. He runs very simple sets. So as I previously mentioned, for support Bennett, you don't really need any artifact sets, so pretty much anything you want to use is good. For Police Noblesse Oblige is generally speaking the most used one because it gives you even more attack when Bennett presses his ult. However, I am a big fan on support Bennett of running double energy recharge, so 2-piece Scholars, 2-piece Exiles in order to get his ult up more often, unless he is also with a Pyro carry like Diluc. I do personally prioritize on most of my supports getting more frequent ults than slightly stronger ults. And while carry Bennett does generate an obscene amount of energy, you don't really want a support Bennett with low damage to be stealing screen time away from your higher damage characters, so generally speaking he doesn't generate much energy for himself. However, if you don't really find the need to have extra energy recharging your set bonuses to have Bennett ult off cooldown, which is likely if you run him with a Cleo or Diluc, then 4-piece Noblesse Oblige for more powerful ults, or 4-piece Instructors so he can transfer EM over to your other characters, 4-piece Exiles or 4-piece Scholars, although honestly they're kind of weak 4-set bonuses and really meant for mid-game, not end-game. All of these standard 4-set bonuses work because again, your set bonuses cannot scale the damage buff on his ult, so you might as well just go for energy recharge or some other useful 4-set utility sets. I do not personally recommend Maiden's beloved 4-set on him because I just don't think the Maiden set's very good. At least for me, a Bennett with 0 artifacts still heals plenty enough, and I'd much rather have more frequent ults by running energy recharge on him instead of having more powerful ults. Especially when the healing on him feels perfectly satisfactory to me. However, depending on how you play, you might want more healing. And more healing on Bennett does mean if you don't have Consolidation 1, you do get more attack buff uptime, so really up to you, it is an option. Just don't run witches on the support Bennett. There's no reason to do it because he should really never be using his abilities too much other than his ult because you don't want to steal screen time from your actual DPS carries. Now, for carry sets, on the other hand, witches and gladiators are going to be his 2 best friends. If you are running a carry Bennett with either a Jingqiu or a Chongyun or both for freeze or vaporize, his combo does lean towards pyro over physical or cryo at that point because of the damage amp you're getting on all of his abilities. So at this point, witches is a very strong option for him because he's the only other pyro character in the game currently other than Diluc who can stack up the second 4-set passive very quickly. And more importantly, he and Diluc are the only 2 who can actually keep it up the entire fight. In the footage above, I am running Bennett with a gladiator set because I only have 1 leveled up witches set so far and it's stuck on my Diluc. Diluc is going to be my other carry on the team 1 for a BiS 12, so I can't unfortunately share the set. Diluc is a much better user of witches than Bennett is, and he's also a worse user of gladiators than Bennett is, so this is just the one that makes the most sense for my accounts. But a nice plus 16 witches set on a Bennett carry with either a Chongyun or Jingqiu or both supports does some fatty melt damage. As for weapons, well, any ER sword, just the best one you have on Bennett, is good for support. And as for carry weapons, the 4-star black sword from the battle pass is just hands down the best 4-star sword in the game. In fact, it's probably one of the best 4-stars in the game, period, because it's one of the only 4-stars that actually competes or in some cases beats 5-star weapons. And on top of that, it heals you. I actually don't understand why black sword is allowed to be so strong, but I'm not complaining. In fact, on endgame comps, it's actually better to run black sword over Aquila Favonius for Bennett if you are running a Chongyun melt team because you can't make use of the physical substat on Aquila Favonius. At least on my particular setups, whether Aquila Favonius or black sword is better really just depends on how many crit substats you have in your build. Depending on the starting stats you have, one is slightly stronger than the other by a % or 2, but either way the point is they're both very good options. And I also just don't use 5-star weapons in general because I find it skews my team comp testing. Other than that, good options would be the flute or prototype Rancor. Rancor does kind of fall off a bit because it's a physical substat as well. If you're in Chongyun, you don't do physical damage, but it is craftable and it's better than any of the 3-star options in the game because 3-star weapons just get really dumpstered by how low their base attack scaling is from being 3-star. Additionally, the passive on Rancor isn't super strong on Bennett because, fun fact, the flat attack on Bennett's build makes any attack % you get from your build or weapons much weaker. This is because Bennett's ult adds so much flat bonus attack that it pretty much hits diminishing returns on adding extra attack into your build. In fact, I can't do this because I don't have this piece available, but if you have have the option to run an EM Hourglass instead of an Attack Hourglass on a Melt team for Bennett, it's actually more DPS. And then his other artifact slots are just standard stuff. You run either crit chance or crit damage, depending on which one gets you closer to the 1-to-2 ratio, at least for your helmet. And then for Cup, you generally run Pyro Cup because you want to run either a Vaporize or Melt team with Bennett, and that does lean his combo towards Pyro damage. However, if you're not running a Vaporize or Melt team on him, he's better off running a Physical Cup because the majority of his combo is still physical unless you're vaporizing or melting his abilities. Cryo Cup is also an option if you want to focus on his basic attack DPS against Pyro immune enemies with the Chongyun. That's more of a specific element counter sort of build though. Now, normally when a character has such split damage type like Bennett, that actually makes him a good candidate for an attack percent cup instead of an element percent cup. However, as I just mentioned with the attack percent hourglasses, unfortunately attack percent on Bennett is relatively speaking very weak. Because again, when you're adding up to 700 flat bonus attack all the time on your Bennett because he's ulting off cooldown, it becomes a drop in the bucket and it becomes a very low total percent damage gain. Attack gets much worse the more you add it into your build, and Bennett adds in up to 700 just all the time. And yes, this also applies to teams that have a Bennett support on them instead. Bennett support's flat attack boost is literally the reason why most of the endgame teams in the game don't run that much or any attack percents in their builds. They instead focus on getting a big crit stack, and then for their hourglass they either run energy recharge for supports that need the ER, or they run elemental mastery to increase their reaction damage. Oh, and did I mention his ult also cleanses, making him basically must use in Abyss 12 right now if you want easier clears. For those who don't know, the hardest content in the game, Abyss 12, does give you condensed ice, which doubles your stamina usage and halves your stamina generation or something close to that, about every 15 seconds. Currently, Bennett is the highest uptime cleanse to remove that effect from your team. Basically, what happens is that because his ult infuses anyone standing on it with Pyro, it cleanses off any other status effects you might have, like for example, the condensed ice. Although you do have to be careful using this around things like either water or electro units because it can overload or vaporize you because you're infused with Pyro. In case you're wondering, by the way, the only two things that can currently cleanse your team in Abyss 12 are either Jean's ult or Bennett's ult. And technically Barbara's E, but that freezes you in order to cleanse it, so it's not really worth using. Again, at the current moment, yes, I've heard the rumors about Jin Yan's shield as well, but we're not talking about that because it's leaked information and we'll just figure it out if it actually works that way when she comes out in a day or two. Leaked information is by its very nature unreliable, and I just don't like talking about it on the channel. Now, other characters can imbue themselves with a different status to cleanse off the effect, like for example, Beidou and Razor and Jingqiu can actually cleanse themselves, but they cannot cleanse your team. But yeah, that's Bennett. He is the best healer slot in the game because of the raw amount of attack he adds to your team by simply being the healer. And he is a better carry than basically every carry in this game with the exception of the top tier double S tier carries. And even then, his total team DPS calculations are actually very comparable with theirs because he is funding everyone on his team's ult so quickly. The only other character in this entire game that can compare to a carry Bennett's energy generation for your team is a Venti at Ascension 4, and Venti is the most broken character in the game. And technically a Constellation 6 child who is a melee form all the time is the second highest energy generator next to a Bennett. Even Fischl can only scrape to about half the energy generation that a carry Bennett can put out. Okay, so originally I was planning on talking about Razor and jungling with Crescent Pike at this point in the video, but we're already at the 21-minute mark. Apparently, even when I try to talk about Bennett briefly and describe his team compositions and talk about his artifacts and try to do a salesman pitch, it still can't be under 20 minutes because there's just too much to talk about with Bennett. So, new plan. I am instead going to talk about Razor, jungling with Crescent Pike, and Bennett when I do the next video talking about which of the 4-star carries in the game are 5-star power level. Because, by the way, it's those 3 characters. Either way, I wanted to get this video out as soon as possible because Bennett is leaving the shop in 1 or 2 days. Now, I'll make sure as many people as possible know to get a Bennett if you can. As always, thank you so much for checking out the video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like the video, comment, as well as share it with your friends who don't understand how overpowered Bennett is. All of these things are the best way to help support us for free because they help push up the videos in the SEO so more people see it naturally. Now, I am working on these other character guides as well as the Team Comp Masterclass series. However, with Zhongli and Jin Yan coming out, I am going to have to dedicate a lot of time towards towards testing them. Now, if you are interested in seeing Zhongli testing specifically for geo compositions, be sure to check out my channel partner Tuner over twitch.tv/tuner. He will be doing all of the Zhongli testing for geo compositions, while I will be focusing on Xinyan testing as well as Zhongli testing as a Petra support for normal teams. And also don't forget to check out our Twitters. The @JinxMathList is my personal one where I post all the stuff that I'm working on before it comes to video form, and the @JinxTuner is the company account run by Tuner for channel updates and things like that. And also be sure to check out our Discord server, the Mathalos Nest. We have a beautiful community of people there who are helping each other out, doing domains together, sharing builds, learning, and all that good stuff. And of course, none of this would be possible with the generosity of our patrons. I do say this every video, and y'all know I'm gonna say it every video, y'all the best. We do also have some other Discord servers I do hang out in, namely the Child Mains and the Kaching Mains Discord server. Links to that and various other things you might have seen in the video in the description. Okay, I'm gonna go have some dinner and then maybe do a little bit of daily farming, so be sure to subscribe, hit a notification bell if you want to see any of the new videos that are coming out when they come out, or you want to see the stream when I do stream about the Zhongli and Xinyan testing day 1, all that good stuff. Happy waifu hunting, whalers. We'll see you in the next one. Bye!